Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Nick Kanoki, the Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I am very excited for a different ALN Thursday at 3. We've got two guests today, Amanda J. Briggs and Alan T. Blair, co-founders of Briggs and Blair Consulting. Before we get underway, we want to thank our Platinum organizational member, Onuma System, as well as our patron members, and all our organizational members for making programming like this and our newsletter possible. So if you're interested in working with us, we would love to hear from you. So please reach out. And with that, I will also say, if you are interested in what you're hearing today on this session, please send any comments, questions, or feedback to the chat, or you can use the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar. And don't be afraid to ask questions. And there's even an anonymous question option through the Q&A. So feel free to do whatever is comfortable for you. With that, Mike Bordenaro, Executive Director for the ALN, welcome.
Hello, thank you, Nick. Good to see the flowery background. Things good in Lander?
Oh yeah, spring is rolling. We're not quite at peak wildflower season yet, but in about a month we should be.
Excellent. I'm broadcasting today from Fort Wayne, Indiana, with my Aunt Elizabeth. So you are right. Today is a special episode. We talk about tangible assets on a regular basis, and we have ventured into some intangible assets, but we're going deep into intangible assets today. And we were fortunate to find out about the Briggs and Blair Consulting Company, which addresses sexual harassment in the workplace. And when I talked with Amanda and Alan about their company, they have statistics on the costs of the tarnishing that occurs to your company when sexual harassment and abuse occurs, and the effect on the bottom line, in addition to the impact on the intangible impact on brand and reputation. And full disclosure, I am the very proud uncle of Amanda Briggs, and doesn't stop this being a very important asset management issue. And we thank Amanda Briggs and Alan Blair. Come on down for joining us to talk about the impact on brands and reputation and bottom line costs too. So Amanda and Alan, why don't you introduce yourselves and give us a little bit about your backgrounds?
Thank you very much. So my name is Alan Blair. I am a part of Briggs and Blair. I've been working in the realm of sexual harassment, sexual assault for the last 21 years. And I spent 17 of those years working in the military, specifically the Air Force. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to help set up the sexual assault program in the Air Force back in 2005. I've also had the opportunity to work literally with hundreds of victims/survivors of sexual assault. I have had the opportunity to also train thousands of either military members or civilians working on military bases. I've also had the opportunity to speak at national conferences, do community in the work, and also had an opportunity to even train, a few members of Congress. So this is something that is near and dear to me. Didn't think that I would have spent 17 years within the Air Force, but 22 years in total working in this field. But I'm happy to share the knowledge and also just some of the research and training that Amanda and I have done. So I'm looking forward to moving forward.
All right, so I'm Amanda Briggs. So happy to be here today. Mike, thanks again for having us on to chat with your audience. My background is that I have been in this field of advocacy, either full or part-time, for about 17 years. I am a proud Air Force and Space Force veteran, so I commissioned into the Air Force as an active duty officer, and I worked in national defense policy, and then space operations. And then in 2020, when we stood up the Space Force, I cross-commissioned into the Space Force, and I was a test director for experimental satellites. And one of my favorite things about my time in the military is that in addition to my day job, which was usually, as an officer, very much focused on taking care of people, taking care of troops, but also taking care of the mission. And I had the opportunity to be part of a lot of initiatives for national defense around space policy. But in addition to that, I got to do just an enormous amount of advocacy and volunteerism within the DoD. So not just limited to the Air and Space Force. So that was really neat. And that is actually how Alan and I met. We met when I was stationed at Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. And he was the director for Air Education and Training Command. For those of you who are familiar with the military, that's a very high level organization within the Air Force. And he was the sexual assault prevention and response coordinator. And those trainings in the military, they're mandatory. And a lot of people tend to have negative attitudes about them at times just because they're very focused on, hey, don't rape each other. And a lot of us know that, we know that we're not going to go to work and commit sexual crimes toward each other. But the way Alan approached that topic with so much compassion and emotional intelligence and just the Hearts and Minds campaign he was running, I was like, that is someone I want to work with. So we ended up doing just an enormous amount of volunteerism and advocacy within the DoD. And through that, between that and my work in the civilian world, I have had the honor of speaking with thousands of survivors at this point, so many family members, other people who are impacted by sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I was able to write and release a book on healthy and helpful response about that. And after I retired from the Air Force or the Space Force last year, I called Alan and was like, I got this crazy idea. Let's start a consulting firm where we really help organizations and communities and families not just prevent these issues from occurring, because we care very much about prevention, but Alan and I kind of have a niche where we focus on, okay, this has happened, there's been a trauma. Now, how do we move forward? How do we heal? How do we thrive?
So a lot of what we advocate with the Asset Leadership Network is preventive maintenance. And I don't want to call it that, but I'm sure there is an angle on that. But I was really happy when I talked with you about the possibility and you had statistics on actual costs. And that's something we can really, our audience can really relate to. So maybe we can get some preventive actions or attitudes or culture establishment. But let's talk about costs to really drive this home.
Well, for sure. Nick, if you could bring up the slide. And we want to talk to you today about the total impact of sexual assault. And that can mean so many things, but let's talk about the impact on your bottom line, your organization's reputation, your ability to recruit and retain top talent. Those are such important things. The cost of lack of organizational cohesion. So let's take a quick look at the numbers. So 43% of individuals who identify as male report experiencing sexual harassment and or assault. And that number is almost double for people who identify as female, 81%. And when you look at that list of at-risk demographics, that probably isn't going to shock you, right? It's women, it's low income, people of color, people who identify as LGBTQ+, and people who live with a disability. So when we look at this, we applaud diversity. We want diversity. That is a major topic in organizations today, is how do we grow our diversity in our teams. And as you do that, you also need to be thinking about the culture you're inviting these people into. As you invite people of color to sit at the table, as you invite people who are part of the LGBTQ community or who live with a disability, you need to think about the culture you're bringing them into and make sure that the trickle down from the very top is healthy and is not hostile toward these individuals. So then when you look at the actual dollars and cents, right? The most expensive sexual harassment lawsuit settled for $168 million in 2012. And that is an enormous amount of money. On average, you can expect one of those sexual harassment cases to cost you about $153 $600,000. Now, in the United States, across all industry, it's estimated to cost about $6.7 million for sexual assault and harassment litigation. And that number, that 6.7 million, does not cover things like absenteeism, turnover, so your cost to recruit new people, to train them, and your decreased productivity as people are very distracted and demoralized by hostile work environments or knowing of a sexual assault or harassment or something else that is toxic that's going on in your culture. And the intangible cost, of course, is your employee, your organization's reputation, which in the era of LinkedIn and Glassdoor and social media, one incident that is handled poorly or a pocket of unhealthy culture in your organization can blow up and become national news overnight if that is not handled properly. It also, another intangible cost is getting good people on your team, getting them to join your company and stay there. If you don't have a healthy culture, that's going to be very hard to do. And of course, then you also have depression and anxiety, which isn't a cost we talk about a lot, but that kind of ties back into decreased productivity. So there is a link between the intangible and the tangible costs for sure. And Alan, I know you have some very poignant stories that underline this.
Absolutely. And Mike, you had mentioned how important that prevention piece is, and you are absolutely correct. Because many times what we see is that when it comes to sexual harassment, sometimes we see certain comments that are said that falls under, that sexual harassment part of it. But sometimes individuals are not comfortable calling out one another. So it's an attitude of, I'm just going to stay quiet. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to, really get involved. And what happens when someone isn't called out and that behavior and those attitudes are accepted, then it makes it appear as if this is a behavior that's accepted for the entire organization. And one thing that we've seen is that there's this continuum. So it may start off with sexual harassment, then it may move to touching and feeling, and it may eventually get to the point in which we have an actual sexual assault. And Amanda and I, we have seen a number of different situations, cases, organizations that have been impacted by this. And I'm going to just share an example that most of us have heard about. And it took place at Lackland Air Force Base. And it was the basic military training, or the BMT scandal, that took place there. I was actually working there at Lackland Air Force Base at this time. And I was working in a sexual assault response and prevention program. And in 2011, in June of 2011, the first accusation came forward from one of the young basic military trainees. And she came forward and said, hey, this MTI military training instructor did these horrible things to me, and I felt like I had to have sex with them. So the behavior that she described was a sexual assault or a rape. Once she came forward, a number of other young women came forward and said, yes, this MTI did this to me, this MTI did that to me. And since there were so many people coming forward, then there was a huge investigation. And from that investigation, it was found that there was a culture, and all of these sexual assaults were really taking place in 2 squadrons. And they found that there was a culture that was accepted amongst the military training instructors. People knew that they were doing wrong, but no one wanted to come forward and say anything. And because no one said anything, sexual harassment turned into sexual assault. Sexual assault was 1 victim, 2 victims, 3 victims. And then it started from 1 MTI, 2 MTIs, and then it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And because it wasn't dealt with initially, then once it got big, and then when the media got a hold of this story, I mean, it made national news. And as it made national news, and many of you can attest to this, sometimes when the media gets a hold of a story, it's not always accurate. And many times they paint the worst picture that they can to make sure that people are going to listen in, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what happened at Lackland. Now, I'm not trying to minimize what those military training instructors did, but when the media got done with what they were saying, it made it appear as if the Air Force was not a safe place for young women to join. It also highlighted what the commanders or those who were in charge, their failure to control the culture, be aware of the culture, and to do something about it. As a result, there was 2 squadrons that these sexual assaults were taking place in. Both squadron commanders were fired, as well as the person who was next in line, who was the group commander. That person was fired as well. Now, again, this situation happened in June of 2011. So I just want to fast forward to the end of 2012. Now, I went to a national conference in 2012, and I'm at this national conference, and I've got my name tag, and on my name tag, it said Alan Blair, Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Training Specialist. Then on the bottom line was Lackland Air Force Base. So at this conference, I was having lunch, and I was sitting at this table, and I was sitting at the table with some of the other attendees of this conference. Now, as I'm sitting there eating, one lady across from me, she read my name tag. She was asking me questions like, "Hey, Air Force, Lackland Air Force Base, can you kind of tell me some things about the Air Force?" So I served in the Air Force for 7 years. And I also commissioned kind of like Amanda. And I was telling them the benefits and how great it was, because I really did have a great experience with the Air Force. And I was giving her this information, and she was just soaking it in. And she said, the reason I'm asking this question is because I've got a niece who wants to join the Air Force. I said, I think it's a great opportunity. And she was like, okay, thank you for sharing this information. Right after we finished eating lunch, there was going to be a viewing of a movie/documentary. And the documentary was titled The Invisible War. And this documentary contained testimonies of victims of sexual assault in the military. So from all the different services. So we went in and we're watching a movie. As we're watching the movie, the way that the different services were portrayed was tough. These survivors of sexual assault were telling their stories. They were talking about how other military members sexually assaulted them and how their cases were not handled correctly. And it made it appear as if, they were just trying to put these things under the rug, sweep them under the rug. So I'm like, oh my gosh, when this movie is over, I'm going to make a beeline for that door and I am leaving. And as soon as that movie was over, I headed out the door and I was walking down the hallway. As I was walking down the hallway, all I could hear was these footsteps coming behind me. I'm like, oh gosh. And as I continue walking, I felt somebody grab my shoulder and kind of turn me around. So in front of me was this lady that I was talking to while I was eating lunch, telling her all these great things about the Air Force. Once she spun me around, she put her finger in my face and she said, I will never allow my niece to go into the Air Force. And she turned around and she walked away. One of the reasons I share that story is that the Air Force had a reputation of saying, hey, we want the brightest, the best to join our military. But because of the incidents that took place at a couple of squadrons at BMT, it not only tarnished basic military training, it tarnished the entire Air Force, but not only the Air Force, but the entire military. So the reputation specifically of the Air Force took a huge hit. But not only the reputation, but then people were afraid to send, their daughters to the Air Force. Initially, people were afraid of, women coming into the Air Force or fighting in combat. So people were not afraid of their daughters fighting in combat. Now people were afraid of their daughters joining the military because they felt that they would be sexually assaulted. So those are just some of the results when something like this happens within a unit. And again, this is just an example that we use because it made national news. But Amanda and I have seen this so many times in which if something was said, if the culture was dealt with initially, Mike, like you were saying, that prevention piece, it would have never reached a point that it did.
So what kind of preventive actions, because it was 2 squadrons, you have been talking about a body of work, and I would imagine a lot of that is just raising awareness ahead of time to try to stop things from happening in the first place. And that's what our audience members would have the opportunity to do. So what kind of preventative actions can you take?
And I can speak about a few, and both of them require education. Number one, people within organizations need to be educated of what this looks like. And not only educated of what it looks like, but educated of how do you step in or say or do something and intervening amongst your peers, because people are simply not equipped with the tools to step in or say something, because if they do, they feel like they may be ostracized or you're not a team player. So I think that those are two important pieces that people need to know and they need to be equipped with. You have anything to add to that, Amanda?
Yeah, I do. I love this question. So a couple things right off the bat. This is uncomfortable, you know, when we're talking about sexual assault, sexual harassment, this is a topic that is difficult for just about everyone on the planet. So if that's you, that is okay. Congratulations, you're a normal human. It's hard to step in front of a situation and stop it in its tracks. So as leaders, so for our demographic here today, I'm going to guess like mostly senior leaders and organizations.
Yes.
Is that correct? And for those of you watching in the future, a quick heads up to you. Senior leaders are usually the last to know about toxic culture because people want to give the boss good news. Nobody wants to be that person giving the boss bad news. So in our work, we find senior leaders are either the perpetrators of the crime or the very last to know, even if their heart is exactly where it needs to be, it's in the right place, they care about this. So what can you do, right? Number one, get out there with your people, get to know them. Make sure that your organization knows you walk around. And if there's stuff going down that shouldn't be going down, you're going to see it, you're going to hear it. And number two, when you see it or when you hear it, insert yourself into it. So one of my favorite commanders in the military, we had some of the best culture I've ever experienced in a work center. And he had this thing he would do when anyone got close to a line, he'd be like, you can't say that. And it kind of broke the tension and it helped people kind of come out of whatever, funk they were in that moment where they were maybe going to cross the line of what's appropriate in the workplace. And he empowered all of us to do that. So we had this amazing culture of prevention because anytime someone got close, it was completely normalized in the culture to say, you can't say that. And I still use this technique to this day as a leader. I used it as a leader in the military. So definitely being out there as much as you can. And secondly, leading by example in terms of stopping, getting in front of it, have those honest conversations, bring people in to talk about the hard stuff, sit in the front, look engaged, look excited that I know this is a tough topic, but this is going to make us better as an organization. And I want to be here.
All right, it's a tough topic. So what kind of training, what kind of education? Do you just leave leaflets in the lunchroom? Do you put things up on the pinboard? Do you have a day? Do you have an hour? What kind of programs?
Some of both. So I will say studies show that the more you get your message visually in front of people, the better. So if you have signs in the restrooms, in the lunchrooms, in the hallways, just everywhere that lays out your organizational culture and what is expected in terms of conduct in the workplace, that is statistically proven to make a difference. Some organizations have gone as far as surprising their employees, and they show up one morning and it's now their desktop. The company values, the rules of conduct, and it's in front of their faces all the time so they know how to behave. So that's one way. Another way is—
But wait, before you leave that, the rules of conduct, that sounds interesting because then it can be establishing other cultural elements, and it's not just like all of a sudden red flag on sexual harassment. You say that you want to establish a culture, and of course, sexual harassment has no place in it. That seems robust.
Yes, but you can even step it back. So Delta 9, the Space Force, we stood up Delta 9, which is orbital warfare. We've never had an orbital warfare arm of our military before. I was actually still on active duty at the time, and I was invited to come in and conduct the culture study to help stand up this new orbital warfare branch or orbital warfare organization. And so I started crowdsourcing, like, who are we going to be when we walk through these doors? And it can get to a point, if you have a very emotionally intelligent and mature tool within your organization, you might not even have to say, we don't sexually harass each other, you can say we treat each other with dignity and respect. And that underpins and stops the organization from getting to that moment of sexual harassment. So a lot of it is heart and mind work. It's character-based recruitment of your employees. It's making sure that you are policing yourself as a leader, that you are leading by example, that you are stepping in where you need to step in, that you are engaged in this topic, and that people know this topic really matters to you, because they're going to be less likely to cross that line if they know the boss cares.
And they will also, if they see someone cross that line, and how the boss reacts and holds others accountable. But if the boss isn't holding anyone accountable and just like allowing it, then that individual's word is no good. So that accountability piece is also important.
Yeah, I like this, the idea of it being, part of a bigger culture message, because what we're trying to have people do is insert a asset management culture. And we need to think in terms of it as
It's
part
bigger.
of overall culture.
Yeah.
And really like what you brought to us there. And you were going to say a second thing and I cut you off. So do you remember what your second thing was, or did I erase your memory by
Me or
Stop.
Alan?
You, Amanda?
I think I was probably going to say something along the line of, the bottom line is important, and we understand that. Alan and I understand that. It's part of how you take care of your employees, right? You are providing them a living where they can take care of themselves and their loved ones. It is important. What we are proposing is that taking care of people is just as important as taking care of the bottom line. That is what underpins our society, not just in the workplace, but as a whole. But as you take care of those people, as you take care of your reputation, as you protect that, you are protecting your bottom line, because you will be able to recruit and retain top talent. People will have nothing but good things to say about your organization. They will want to invite other top talent they know to join your organization. So as you take care of the people, as you take care of the culture, as you put such a powerful emphasis on preventing sexual harassment and assault in the workplace, you really are protecting your bottom line right there with it.
Well, we ran into a little technical difficulty getting started, so I hope you can stick around because I've got some more questions. And Nick, if you can give us an early official end, and then we'll get into some more things, including the type of training that Briggs and Blair provides.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that, Amanda and Alan, and looking forward to continuing the discussion. And thank you to our Platinum organizational member, Onuma System, and our other patron members, as well as all our organizational members. Really grateful for their support of this program and other things the ALN is up to. So please reach out if you're interested in working with us, and we can figure out how to best collaborate. And just want to say that next week on ALN Thursday at 3, we have a Cities and Places Asset Leadership Board session. So another special ALN Thursday at 3 next week. And we hope to see you there. You can register on our website.
That'll be a full hour. We know that ahead of time. This one might go to a full hour. We'll see how that goes. But what does Briggs and Blair offer?
Well, Alan, do you want me to take this one?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So one of our specialties is tailoring to the client's needs. So we do offer training that you can select from our website in terms of sexual assault and harassment prevention and response. One of our passion projects is the total impact of sexual assault, which Alan kind of mentioned. I'll let him speak to that a bit more. We offer individual and organizational resilience, mental health, cyber harassment and bullying prevention and response. There's on our website, briggsblair.com, you can find an entire list of the services we provide. We also have a podcast where we release episodes a couple times a month, usually, where we take on specific issues and talk through them, kind of like you see us today. They're very casual conversations. And as far as the training goes, we offer just training blocks, seminars that are multi-day. We offer workshops, single or multi-day workshops. We do speaking and presenting at conferences as well. We do a lot of research. One of my favorite things to do, because I'm a nerd, is the organizational cultural studies and helping organizations just become the best, safest, healthiest, most efficient and effective that they can possibly be. So that's just a little nutshell of what we provide. But Alan, over to you.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. And also resiliency. What's one thing that I could say Amanda, sometimes I call Amanda a superwoman because everything she puts her hand on, it's like gold. But she's been through a lot. I've been through a lot, and we've seen others who have gone through a lot. And we really focus on how do you get through some of these different things. And one aspect that Amanda mentioned that a lot of times people don't understand or even take into account is kind of that total impact of sexual assault. Many times when we think about sexual assault, we spend a lot of time thinking about the victim who's been sexually assaulted or sexually harassed and the people that are around that individual. But what about especially when we take a look at an organization, but what about the perpetrator and everybody who's around the perpetrator? And really, how does that impact the organization as a whole? And we've also, the example that I gave for Lackland, we speak a lot about the woman as the victim, but man, we have worked with a lot of men who have also been sexually assaulted, and just the dynamics around that as well, in which people don't know. So like Amanda said, we cover an array of topics. We were able to specialize the training to whatever the audience is, but we've got a lot of experience behind us.
A lot of stories between the two of us. We really believe in the powerful combination of research and storytelling to help hearts and minds take in these difficult topics. It's so funny because when people ask me what I do for work, I'm like, well, buckle up because it's all the hard stuff. I talk about suicide, depression, sexual assault, sexual harassment, all of those things. And I mean, we love this and we know it's hard. And that's why we appreciate people like y'all taking time out of your day, valuable time out of your day to learn about this and to care about this, especially this month, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Thank you for mentioning that. I should have mentioned it at the top of the hour.
That's okay. I was going to say something, but then my mic and, everything stopped working. So we got it in there.
Yeah, that's what threw us off. That's why we're in the overtime to address that and some other issues, such as your survey. You just kind of talked about it, but Nick posted it up. Will you tell us more about the survey?
Yes. Okay. So this survey, if it applies to you or anyone you know or anyone in your organization, we would love to have you fill it out or pass it along to others. It's short, it's confidential, it's anonymous. And what is it about? The total impact of sexual assault. So this survey is specifically designed for people who know and or love someone who perpetrated a sex crime, because as Alan mentioned, we do have a lot of resources. We're growing so much as a society in terms of healthy and helpful response for the victim and everyone in their circle. Where we are failing and the field of advocacy, Alan and I are really working to move forward, is this kind of lost demographic of everyone who knows and loves the perpetrator. So the survey is short and it specifically asks about care and resources that you received in the aftermath. And so far, almost everyone has put no, which is sad, but not unexpected. And we are working to change that. We are working to have the same level of care and response available to people who know and love the perpetrator as there is currently available for people who know and love the victim.
So you're not only innovative in that respect, your book focused on the people who know the victim of sexual abuse or sexual assault, and that those people don't know what to say. They frequently just become silent. And your book prepares people with words and actions. Can you address some of that? Because I thought that was
absolutely. So I am a sexual assault survivor. I am also a sexual harassment in the workplace survivor, unfortunately, multiple times over. So it's a long story. You can read about it in the book or listen to one of our podcast episodes, but I did eventually report the perpetrator, who was a family member. And after 4 years in criminal court, he kind of got a slap on the wrist, and the legal system ended very poorly. And there was a lot of ignorant response that came back at me in the aftermath of that case. And I had a long weekend. I was in the military at the time. I had a long weekend and I sat down and hand wrote the first draft of the book because it started out as a letter to my biological family. Everything I wish they had known to be a better support system for me. And it eventually grew, but it's still short. That was one of my primary objectives in writing it. I wanted it to be a quick read because this is a hard subject. People usually don't have vast emotional bandwidth for it when they're in the middle of responding to a trauma. And I also wanted it to be something you could read as a leader, on a one flight across the country, or as a parent who only had maybe 2 hours to sit down and think through this. So it's very conscious of emotional bandwidth and actual time. So I'm very proud of it and I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, it is. And Alan, 1 second. I want to emphasize the word ignorant, which is Latin for lack of knowledge.
Mhm.
And we had a very extensive lack of knowledge. And your book really helps to fill up the lack of knowledge of how to treat. And much of it becomes common sense. It's like, well, of course. Anyway, thank you for that. Alan, what were you going to say?
Hey, Mike, I was just going to kind of echo what you just said, but so many people are ignorant to how to respond because so many people think that it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to somebody that I love. But the reality of it is completely different because so many people are impacted by it, but their reactions to a survivor of sexual assault are absolutely critical. So that person who's responding could help with the healing process, or
Yes.
they can make the sexual assault experience so much worse because they don't know what to do, or they don't believe that victim, that survivor who is trying to tell them, this is what happened to me. And so
Mhm.
Amanda's book was great. And Amanda, just like what you said, I've given that or recommended that book to commanders that I worked with when I was working at the base level and I was working with commanders. I've recommended that to survivors of sexual assault. I recommended that book to everybody. And even though I worked in this field for a very long time, I was still able to gain knowledge from reading that book. I'm like, oh, I never thought about, oh, that's a really good point. And so bottom line is that is such a great resource just to help you understand, because you never know when you're going to need that knowledge. And if you're ever in that position, you do need to know how to help someone.
And
Well, go ahead, Amanda.
bringing it back to asset management, if you as a leader are preemptively armed with how to have a healthy and helpful response when something like this happens, you can take immediate action to prevent the situation from getting any worse. And not only is that going to take care of people, which is, I'm always going to say that's the most important thing. Not only is that going to take care of your people, like we talked about before, that's going to take care of your bottom line because the situation is not going to spiral out of control.
Your reputation and your
Yeah.
brand.
Your brand, your
Yes.
reputation, you won't be put on blast. You probably won't get canceled, all of those things that can happen in the age of social media. So it's so important to be preemptively armed with this stuff.
Right. Can you put in the chat the best place to find the book?
Yes, I can.
And while
I will
she's
work on
doing
that here.
Alan,
Yes, sir.
can you talk about some of the things that you saw? The Air Force is one of the best asset managers in the world. We have seen enough, we know that. And so can you share some of the best preemptive actions, trainings, forced, not forced, but required, immersion or whatever it is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Mike, some of the best aspects of training that I've seen to be most effective is, one, helping those who are attending the training to have to kind of make it personal for them to, for lack of a better word, to have a dog in the fight. So many people, they just don't know how prevalent or how many people have been sexually assaulted because they're not seen as that safe space. For example, before I started working in this field, I had absolutely no idea how many people that were close to me, like family members, close friends, that have been impacted by this. Once I started working in this field and people saw me as a safe space, I had all kind of people coming to me and sharing these things that they had absolutely not shared with anyone. So
Good
once
for
that,
you.
thank you. But once it's personal, and they realize this could happen to, a brother, a sister, a son, whoever, when they think about that, then once they engage, they're like, okay, this is important. Okay, now where do I go from here? And then they understand how these things happen. And then if they understand that maybe they have a role in this, then if they understand that maybe they can stop some of this, especially in the workplace, by calling somebody out for this inappropriate comment, or calling somebody out when they telling this inappropriate joke. So if they start there and then equipping them with tools to say, okay, this is how you engage and this is how you step up. And I honestly use these things on a daily basis. I even use this at a barbershop, and it was so important because there were so many different generations of young men from age 5 to 60. And the conversation lent itself to, we were talking about Harvey Weinstein, and that came up, and some inappropriate comments came up. So I was able to challenge the conversation that were made. Now, I can't say that everyone became an Alan Blair fan and they believed in what I was saying, but I challenged the narrative that was taking place in that form, in that barbershop. And I had people coming afterwards. They didn't say it out loud. Oh man, I didn't realize that. Oh, that was a good point. And we engaged in a deeper conversation. But those are some of the aspects I think that are important for the training.
Yeah. You address their lack of knowledge.
Exactly.
And in the military, we call what Alan just described on-the-spot correction. And it's something we're supposed to be really great at. And I definitely think that there's room to improve as the DoD, but a lot of organizations, I think also, like I said before, this is hard. It is hard to stand up and say, hey, let's not talk about this. This is not okay. We're going to change the conversation right now. But another thing, to answer your question, Mike, a lot of the training for sexual assault prevention and response that I saw in the military focused on statistics and definitions. We're going to define sexual harassment. We are going to define sexual assault. We're going to define the different ways you can report it. We are going to give you the statistics, and then you are going to walk away and go, okay, I kind of already knew all of that, and just get frustrated about the training. And
Amanda, that's still taking place in 2023.
I know.
Sad to say.
And here's what I would suggest as a fix to that. Don't talk about it. Put it on a sign. Put it on signs everywhere. Here are the definitions. Here are the resources available to you. You can call this number if it happens. And instead, for your training time, bring in people, shameless plug, who can tell you how this impacts hearts and minds and lives, and the difference it makes to have a safe and healthy culture versus one where you don't feel safe. And I was very fortunate. I did experience some issues in the military, but for the most part, I had a very safe and wonderful career. There was one time though, I knew I was being sent somewhere that had a reputation for incredibly toxic culture. And I will never forget, I was going from a unit that had robust, wonderful, beautiful, healthy culture. And my last day there, I actually cried in uniform walking out of that building because I knew what I was leaving and what I was going to. And indeed, it was as bad as the negative reputation I had heard about before.
Sorry.
So yeah, so I think that using that training time to give real life examples of how to do it right and how it goes so wrong when we don't have that safe, healthy culture for folks, that's how I would go about fixing that issue.
Well, Alan made a interesting point about, stopping the jokes. And in the military, the majority of the people are young men who are being trained to be tough and as masculine as possible, more masculine than the enemy. And how to do that while also imparting respect for people's personal boundaries and, not doing crimes is important to have in the same place. So actually, there is a defense dividend if the military is able to address these issues that keep popping up.
And I will say this, you want women in your organization. You want the diversity of thought. You want the ability to multitask. You want, I think the statistics show that organizations who have at least one female on their board make, I think it might be 30% more in profit or something. It's a pretty significant statistic. So you want women there. What I can tell you as a woman is I dislike being in the environment where I am the person holding men accountable. What I love and where I feel safe is when the guy next to me, the man next to me, looks at the person who's saying the inappropriate thing and says, we don't do that here. That is not part of our organizational culture. That is not part of our organizational value system. We won't speak like that. Don't ever do that again. That's powerful. That is so much more powerful than me as a woman saying, don't talk to me like that. When a bro holds a bro accountable, that's when the magic happens.
And Amanda, I will say that for even me, I was brought up in a way in which, kind of like Mike was saying, you know, these jokes are being told. Sometimes they were sexist jokes or definitely inappropriate jokes. And you're supposed to, as a male, I was supposed to laugh, ha, 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 ha. But at the time, I truly didn't understand. And it was before I started working in this field. I truly didn't understand the impact that it was making, or how it was impacting a culture in which women did not feel safe, or they would not have seen me as a safe person because I'm saying ha 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 to this inappropriate joke. But when the light was turned on, because I was educated to the point in which, whoa, I just realized my thought process, the way I was groomed and brought up as a man, that whole masculinity thing was absolutely incorrect. When I learned that, and then I was equipped with some tools of how to address this with men, because sometimes when you're addressing it with another man, you'll get called certain terms. But when I learned how to address it in a way in which I'm not coming off, you know, like we got to fight because I'm calling you out, it freed me to the point in which I could come in, make a comment, educate, and then I step away. I'm not here to force you to believe, but I am here to let you know that comment isn't okay.
And on that note, I think another thing you can do as a leader.
This conversation's not ended. I mean, let's keep going right now, but
okay.
This is great.
So another thing you can do as a leader is have sexual assault prevention and response, sexual harassment prevention and response training that you believe in and you are excited about. And here's why. So for a while I was in the military, we did something called green dot training for sexual assault prevention and response. And I believe it was actually developed for high schoolers. So you put it in the context of military professionals, you know, we're there to kill, right? Like we're fully grown adults and we're doing high schooler prevention and response training. And there was a lot of negativity in the military around that. And a lot of the water cooler conversation was, oh my gosh, this is so dumb. This is so stupid. Why do I have to go to this? Why do I have to do it? And then commanders would get up and they would try their best to be gung-ho about like, this is so important, but you could tell they didn't think it was any good either. And so what that does, what does that teach people? What does it teach the small percentage of perpetrators?
Absolutely.
Oh, this is a place where I'll get away with it because people think this is prevention is dumb and they don't care. So one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader, get training you believe in, get training you are excited about, get training you stand up there. And when you're gung-ho, the authenticity rings through because that is going to have a really powerful trickle-down effect too.
Yes.
That just points at, you know, how unfortunate it is that you're at the leading edge of developing fields of human behavior. I mean, I'm sure there's been sexual studies for ages, but in terms of taking it and understanding the proactive actions to improve culture, you're very at the forefront. So thank you for your work. And Amanda said something about on the spot correction. And I noted in the chat that, you know, it sounds like Deming, you know, just in time manufacturing, you know, fix the problem when you see it. And it's surprising.
You can't say that.
Okay, you never were telling me. All right, I've got
No,
to
no,
be.
no, no. I was saying that was a demonstration of like, yeah, on the spot. You can't say that. Yep. Go.
And it's been so clear to us at the Asset Leadership Network that it's not the tools and processes, those work. It's leadership establishing the culture for asset management. And we need to open the circle a bit, Nick, don't you think? It's not just about asset management. It's how human behavioral interactions impact organizational mission.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lot of interesting comments so far, but a few of them were just how Amanda at some point mentioned, this is the sticky stuff that, people often don't want to talk about, don't want to really bring attention to, because maybe, some less than ideal things come to light because of it. Maybe they're tough issues to squash, not good for reputation, that sort of thing. And I think a lot of asset management is like that. It's the behind the scenes stuff. It's the data collection. It's, things that maybe people think are not sexy or just not exciting, not maybe the most relevant to the mission of the organization. But how important it is to use some storytelling to show people, no, this is directly relating to our mission, or at least our ability to, perform our mission. To have people feel like they can share perspectives that may differ from the collective norm, or it's so powerful when you empower people to be engaged and to speak their mind and give feedback to leadership, to people in powerful positions. Just what can come of that. I really like that.
So we need to have you back. We'll have to have a conversation about how we can help you engage our member organizations and our audience, because a big part of our audience is the U.S. federal government, and we'll figure that out offline. But before we end, is there any closing comments? Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish you would have addressed, or what, or just you can make a closing comment and then we'll wrap it.
I'd say thank you all the people on the line today, people who watch this in the future. Thank you for caring enough to get to this point of the recording and for investing your time into taking care of people, because that directly impacts their lives and your bottom line.
Alan?
Hey, Mike, and I just want to thank you for this opportunity. This is something that Amanda and I are passionate about. And if we are talking to one, or if we're talking to 10,000, it doesn't matter. We want to get these messages across, and we really want to make a difference. So thank you for that opportunity.
All right. Well, we'll keep talking, don't you? Yeah, Nick just did that. This is important, and we want to help provide a platform for these types of discussions. So thank you. Thank you to the audience members who have stuck around. You have engaged people, so congratulations. And we'll see you all next week, and you'll see Amanda and Alan sometime in the future. Bye for now.
Thank you.